Duncan Berry is not here tonight, so Alan Peterson will be the chair tonight. So roll call. I'll call the name and then you just say here. Alan Peterson here. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick here.
David Harris.
David Harris here.
Joe McFarland.
Joe McFarland here.
Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz here.
Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse here.
And Mary Maslowski will be coming a little bit later. Okay. Okay. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Harwich Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. First order of business, we're going to go out of order tonight just because we have a continuance. I understand, Mr. Town Planner, we got a letter from Eastward Homes Business Trust.
That's correct. I'll go through it with you. Got a letter from Susan Ledoux of Eastward asking for a continuance until the Planning Board's meeting of July 13th, 2021. The Planning Department has been in discussion with Eastward about that plan, and the Health Department as well. So without getting too deep into it, they wanted to address some of the potential health issues, even though it didn't bear on the endorsement itself. Okay. Yeah, I will say that the letter also acknowledged that they waived the time under the subdivision control law that this planning board has to act under the subdivision control law. So that gave me a comfort level as well to allow continuance out to that date.
Okay. Any comments from the planning board? Any comment from the public? With that said, I'll entertain a motion to continue the meeting or continue Eastward Homes Business Trust.
If I can add as well, sure. The subdivision control law, doesn't authorize alternate members or associate members of planning boards. So in this case, Mr. Rouse cannot vote on the special permit. He can. So this vote will not include Mr. Rouse.
Okay, will not include Mr. Rouse. Okay. Okay. So I'll entertain a motion from someone.
This is Craig, Mr. Chairman. Make a motion that at the applicant's request, we continue the Eastward Homes Business Trust PB 2021-08 to the meeting scheduled for July 13th, 2021, beginning no earlier than 6:30 p.m.
David Harris, second.
Okay, we have Craig Chadwick with the motion, David Harris with the second, and Alan Peterson, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland. Joe McFarland.
Joe, it looks like you're muted.
There you go. Joe. Well, Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
Okay. So Joe.
Joe McFarland.
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
That's good. Okay, so on to the public hearing. EB 2020-28 Cape Cod Oil Company, H. Tasha TR of MJT Enterprises as applicant. We have Jacobs Driscoll Engineering Incorporated as a representative seeks approval of a site plan review special permit with a waiver to establish and install two 30,000-gallon propane tanks along with pertinent equipment fixtures and site features pertinent to the establishment of a new heating fuel resale and storage use, which is an allowable use within the zoning district. The application is pursuant to the Code of Town of Harwich, Section 325-55. The property is located at 6 Station Avenue, map 39, parcel K3 in the IL zoning district. So if we could hear from representative from Jacobs Driscoll or Pasha.
Mr. Chair, may I just jump in before they begin? So I also understand that you reviewed materials from the missed meeting.
Yes, I did.
The so-called Molyneux. Okay, that's great. And I'll also remind you that it's a continued public hearing. So after the representative and I present some comments, should provide the public an opportunity to provide comments as well. Thank you.
Will do. Thank you. So if we could have a representative speak to it.
Sure, Greg Driscoll here from Jacobs Driscoll Engineering, representing Hearst Tasha and MJT Enterprises for their propane tanks that they'd like to install at their property. Also here tonight is Jody Emden, the propane consultant, and Hearst Tasha is on the call as well.
Okay.
So I'll go through the response to comments letter. With you guys, I'll have a copy of that. If you'd like, I could share my screen and show the letter as well, or the plans.
The comments letter, so that should have been in everyone's packet.
Okay, so the fire department comments, they were pretty much statements. We didn't have any responses to those, and I believe the fire chief went through all these at the last meeting. So it's all right, I'll skip those and head down to the engineering comments.
Yep.
The town engineer's first comment was asking what the total disturbance associated with the project is. We responded stating that it's about 14,800 square feet. There's about a third of an acre, so we'd be below the threshold for the local stormwater permit, as well as a federal NIPTES permit. We wouldn't need one of those either. Next comment of test pits been conducted to confirm groundwater separation from the bottom of infiltration proposed. So we are coordinating with the owner on that to get some test pits done. But we will also coordinate with the engineer to see if he's okay with us doing a test pit at the time of installation or prior to installation. We did have some data from the old septic design, 1997, as well as we used the groundwater, the wetland elevations adjacent to the area that will be installing the infiltration system. And we're also providing a 4-foot separation from groundwater on the design of that. So there's, and the minimum is 2. So we also have some flexibility there as well. If the groundwater does come up a little bit higher, then we'll still be okay. Again, we'll coordinate with engineering on that, or the town engineer. He also asked if there's an existing septic system on the property. We didn't find anything in the Board of Health that septic system design that was proposed for the site back in 1997 was built. They don't have any as-built for it. And the owner doesn't know of any septic system there. We could coordinate with the town engineer again, do a camera inspection to see if there's any drain pipes coming out of the building, where they go to. And it's also possible that the water line to the building is just for hoses and spigots. We can coordinate with the owner about that question. I think there may be a sink in the building, but that might be it. But there's no bathroom. Fourth comment, groundwater recharge volume appears to be miscalculated. We reviewed our calculations and revised the drainage report accordingly and resubmitted. Comment 5, Are there elements of the water quality enhancement being proposed as part of the redevelopment? Water quality is referenced in relation to the roof runoff. But if this water is clean, how is water quality correctly applied? So, as this is a redevelopment project, per the stormwater handbook, standard 7 is for redevelopment projects where you can meet the maximum extent practicable of the standards. And that's what we're doing with this project by installing the infiltration system. We're improving the conditions on site, and that meets standard 7. And we'll also be reducing the amount of runoff that comes off the property as well. So we meet the standards in that respect. Comment number 6. Has any consideration been given to installing a structural water quality unit to treat the runoff from the tank area? We did not consider that. Since it's not oil, it's propane, and it will be installed underground in a sealed system. So any potentials for leaks or spills is low. And if anything did spill, Jody can correct me if I'm wrong here, but propane evaporates rather quickly and doesn't really leave any kind of residue or issues as far as stormwater might be concerned.
It doesn't pool, it dissipates.
Okay. Next comment is from conservation. I said they looked into it and seeing as the work will be outside the 100-foot buffer zone, conservation does not have any direct concern with the project. That being said, there should be no alterations within the 100-foot resource area other than the removal of these stored oil tanks. Any further alteration within the 100-foot buffer zone would need conservation approval. We did indicate on the plans that the storage tank area will be relocated out of the 100-foot buffer zone. Planning staff comments. Landscape plans have not been presented. Landscaping along the residential boundaries should be reviewed pursuant to section 325-43 of the town code. And I believe I went through this as well at the last meeting. On the southern side of the property, there's an 8 to 10 foot high wooded slope. So the residential property is about 8 to 10 feet higher than the subject property. And it's wooded. There's vegetation there now that we don't want to alter. And also there is a stockade fence in between the properties as well. Residential properties are about 8 to 10 feet higher in elevation between the proposed trailer parking spaces, and on the north side of the locust property and the Cape Cod Rail Trail, there's an existing 6-foot high stockade fence that runs along the entire property line. So that's screening on the rail trail side of the property. Based on these existing screening features, the required landscaping along residential boundaries appears to meet the screening requirement, and additional screening is not needed. Comment number 2. The area marked a storage tank area and stockade fencing along a portion of the northern boundary line is encroaching on the Cape Cod Rail Trail property. An easement must be provided for continued permission for this use. So there are no known issues or complaints from the rail trail in the past, but if an easement is required, we'll pursue one. I don't think they'll actually give an easement, but they may grant a license, and we would have to go through the state for that. So if that's something that the board would like us to pursue, that could be a condition of approval. But the existing fence over there provides the screening that's needed between our property and the rail trail. And I also don't think that an adverse possession claim against the state-owned property would be successful. So I don't think there's any interests that are being infringed on in the current situation. Comment 3. There are 3 shipping containers and a shed shown on the existing conditions plan. Uses for these items should be determined, particularly if the containers, if they're particularly the containers if they're to be relocated. If relocated, the plan approval shall be incorporated into the findings and decision. This may require re-examining the parking schedule. Our response is existing shed shown on the plan will remain as the owner is not utilizing it at this time. The 3 existing shipping containers will be consolidated and relocated or removed as needed. And proposed locations for the containers are not known at this time. However, they will be placed in a accessible location. We can run that by the planner at a future date if required. Be part of a condition of approval. Comment 4, no freestanding sign, master sign is shown on the plan, and we are not proposing a freestanding sign as part of this project. Next, we have a comment from Assistant Town Administrator, where she had mentioned that the setbacks for up to 4 trailer parking spaces need to be addressed per Section 325-42L. And in response to that, we have relocated those parking spaces away from the property line in that location. Show it on my screen. So these are the parking spaces, trailer parking spaces right here that were too close, and we've moved them off the property line. We have 7 feet right now, and I think the requirement is a minimum of 5. And we also removed one of the trailer parking spaces. There was one more right here, but that seems to infringe on the turning circle, so one trailer parking space was removed from the plan. And the existing hours of operation, we spoke about that last time as well. The current hours of operation will stay the same. Currently between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., sorry, for the residential delivery drivers. That's their regular work day. Those are the bobtail type of trucks that deliver propane and oil to homes. And trailer drivers typically arrive between 3 and 4 a.m. Comments from the past meeting. Question was asked regarding truck trips, traffic to the site. We spoke to the applicant, Hearst, about any increased truck traffic, and the only increase in traffic to the site will be 3 deliveries per week to fill up those new storage tanks that will be installed. Otherwise, the bobtail residential delivery trucks will remain the same as those trucks right now, as discussed at the last meeting. They currently leave the site, fill up with propane off-site, deliver to the customers, and return back to the site empty. So the only new traffic will be that it'll save time that these trucks don't have to leave and fill up elsewhere. They'll fill up at the site in the morning and be on their way. And then there was a question whether or not the site's driveway labeled as Jeep Hill Street on the Google Maps is in fact a road. Ed Jacobs, my business partner and the firm's professional land surveyor, has further researched that and found no indications that there's a depot road that comes into the site. These property lines that we're showing here are the property lines of the site. And that was the last comment. So turn it back over to the board. Or John, yeah. Nathan?
I think I'd like to hear from the town planner about this. Then we'll go to comments from planning board and the public. So, Mr. Town Planner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You can just call me John.
Mm-hmm.
We can friends quickly. Yeah, largely based on the response to comments I received coming on as the town planner, I prepared some revised findings and conditions for you and put that into a staff report. I'm happy to go through all of them line by line. I think the conditions are probably more important than the findings. The findings would help you support making a decision, and they vary from the most rudimentary information, such as the character of the property owner and applicant, the zoning, the subject zoning district, the map and parcel number, the description of the project. I think those are all things that you can look at yourself. If you have any particular issues with those, let's discuss them and bring them up with me. But what I'd like to go through is the conditions that I suggested in that staff report. And I will go over those line by line, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Okay. So the first condition I suggest is simply that the proposed development is in accordance with the site plan set. Makes sense, but often that's kind of left out to be clear with the applicant that the limit of the work is that set out on the plans which you would be considering for approval. The decision itself runs with the property, so it doesn't just run with the owner. It would continue to run with ownership and title of the property. Decision has to be recorded. This gives some notice to the applicant as well. D, that changes the site not authorized in the decision may require further planning board review. Now, getting to kind of more of the substantive issues, as you heard, there is a significant amount of wooded buffer along the southern part of the site. That shall be retained, so they can't, under this decision, can't clear that. I guess if they ever propose to do that, they would have to come back to this board for a modification of the site plan review. That wooded buffer is important because one of the things the planning board can look at under site plan review, where the use is allowed as a matter of right, which it is in this case, is sufficient screening for the property. So certainly that wooded buffer contributes a great deal to that and is important in that respect. The condition F is that the applicant shall conform to 418G of the code, which sets out inspection requirements after the project is built, certification and as-built requirements. So as you know from your site plan reviews, once a project is completed, an as-built plan has to be provided to the planning board to keep on file, and that as-built plan needs to be consistent with the decision that the planning board has rendered. Getting into kind of a special condition that arose out of the planning board's hearing and discussions, existing storage tank to the north of the site, which is located in the state former railroad layout, is within 100 feet of wetlands, the buffer zone of the wetlands. It shall be removed and relocated on site outside of the 100-foot buffer. If it is relocated, because there's also the potential they could just remove it and not replace it. If it is relocated, the tank shall be placed on site and in accordance with all applicable provisions of the code and will be shown on the as-built plan to be provided to the town. Similarly, those existing shipping and storage containers you heard Mr. Driscoll speak about on site shall be removed entirely from the site or relocated on site. Those are shown on sheet 5 of the site plan set. If they're relocated, the containers shall be placed on site in accordance with the code and again, shown on the as-built plan. Now, after review of the information from the hearing, one condition I chose not to include, but this is really the planning board's decision, is the removal of the fence from that layout of the state's layout of the former railroad. In one sense, that's important and goes directly to site plan review of the planning board. That provides really important screening to the site from the industrial operations to the rail trail. And to the extent that the planning board has some concerns over ownership, those are largely out of site plan review and are civil matter as between the state and the applicant. Now, if you want to ask them whether they would relocate the fence, that's in your prerogative to do. But as a matter of site plan review, it's actually performing a function very well that's consistent within the jurisdiction of the site plan, which is screening and industrial use. So that's really up to you whether you want to discuss that with the applicant and ask them to move it back on the site. One thing I'll say, if it moves back on the site, it actually may be less useful. It may be more useful in its current location. Now, the other alternative that was put out there is they could ask for some sort of property right from the state to maintain that, whether it's an easement or a license. But again, I leave that to you, Mr. Chair, and the board to determine whether you want to incorporate that. Okay. I'll finish with a couple of thoughts. I did reach out to the town engineer about a couple issues that were discussed at the last hearing. The first issue was generally about the drainage. An updated drainage report was provided. This doesn't require what's called a local stormwater permit, because there isn't basically an acre of disturbance or impervious. But nonetheless, you look at drainage as part of site plan review. The updated drainage calculations, given what is proposed here, were sufficient to the town engineer. Secondly, this whole issue that came up at the last hearing with the road layout, admittedly strange road layout. You have Main Street terminate into the state layout, and then what's now called Station Ave, what was once called in the records in the registry Deeper Road, come off of that. That I did do a title search today, and I did talk to the town engineer. That is indeed the record layout of those roads. And there is no roadway that goes onto the site that has a character of a road for purposes of the Harwich zoning bylaw or the registry of deeds, and certainly wouldn't have the character of anything that would require further setbacks to it on the site itself. I'll leave you with the ultimate recommendation by staff, given that, and I'm sure Charlene has spoken to you about this as well, where you have a use allowed as of right, and this heating use is allowed as of right in the industrial district, it's sufficient, it substantially limits the jurisdiction the planning board has. You can't deny the use, you can condition the use, but as I read the zoning bylaw, you can condition it to address three concerns: screening, traffic safety, including pedestrian safety, and drainage. And so I think that has been done at this point. The fire department, I think, did a great job in the jurisdiction they had in addressing really a primary issue, which was the burying of the tank, which went a great deal to address safety issues and visual impact and other character issues here. So staff's recommendation here, planning staff's recommendation, is to adopt the findings and conditions as written and to approve the site plan special permit subject to those conditions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, John. Any comments from the board?
Mr. Chairman, this is Craig.
Go ahead, Craig.
Thank you. John, on the comments that you made about that stockade fence that's on the state property, Cape Cod Rail Trail, and explained that it's really doing its job, what it's supposed to do. We could, if I understand you correctly, you're not making a recommendation for us to make a condition to have them bring the stockade fence back on the property. But if we as the board decided to, we can do that. My question is, and it's probably a catch-22 kind of thing, can we condition them to leave the fence where it is, even though we know it's on state property?
That's a great point. I think what you could say, which would run with the property, is cite that there's an existing fence there, and a fence has to be maintained in any event along the northern property line. So even if that fence goes away, some fence has to be maintained on or along the northern property line.
Okay, that's good. I think that's a good answer. And the second question, if I might, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. And I think this is probably for Mr. Driscoll. Those 3 storage container or shipping containers, I assume were not being used. Well, I shouldn't assume. Are they being used for shipping things in and out of the property, or are they simply there as a good place to store things? And if so, what is stored inside them? Propane tanks, equipment, what have you?
I believe they're there to store things. Hurst, do you have more information on it?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just have storage parts.
Can you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, I'm Hurst Tasha from MJT Enterprises.
Thanks. Go ahead.
And the containers are just used for storage. There's some truck parts and miscellaneous stuff in them.
No propane tanks filled with propane or nothing of a safety hazard.
No, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the answers.
Yep. Any other members of Mr. Rouse? Yep. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. The hours of operation are 7 to 5. Is that 5 or 6 days a week? What is that? How many days a week is it?
First, is that 5 days a week or?
It's generally 5, but in the cold winter days, it could be 6.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Mr. Harris?
Yeah, I just wanted to check with John. Should the maintaining, if the board agrees to applicant shall maintain the fence along the northern property line, should that be added to the conditions, or did I miss it? It's already there.
No, you're absolutely right. We would have to add that. So if you know, the motion would be to adopt the draft written findings and conditions with the additional condition that a fence be maintained on or along the northern property line.
So you're saying we do not have to read all of these conditions into the record?
So long as I think so. You know, this is a written document now, and if you all agree, you can just say to accept the findings and conditions as written in the May 11th, 2021 staff report with the additional conditions. So if that's a direction you could head, I don't think we need to go through, you know, the majesty of reading everything word for word. That's your decision how to do it.
Certainly shorten the meeting.
Yes. I think Joe McFarland would enjoy that, so I think we should go with that. Any other comments from the board? Joe, do you have any comments at all?
No comment.
No comment. Is Mary on the line? No. Any comments from the public at all? Any comments from the public? No?
Mr.
Yes.
Chair?
Yes.
Ed Braz, we're butters at 424 Great Western Road.
Okay. Yep.
One of the things that we talked about at the previous meeting before it was adjourned was determining whether there were any conditions for the operation as a whole, not just the propane portion of the operation, but if there were any conditions listed at the previous approval for the site as it previously existed as in regards to hours of operation. That was something that was discussed. I haven't heard an answer to that this evening, and I don't know if staff was able to determine that, or if the planning board was able to be to determine that leading up to tonight.
John, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, that was not an issue I saw, but so I did not pursue it. But I would want to be careful with that because that property is not before you this evening.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Stoltz.
Go ahead, Mr. Stoltz.
I'd like to have a question about the deliveries of the trailer trucks between 3 and 4 a.m. That seems like a very early in the morning type thing for the residents around there. Is there any chance they can change their times?
Chris, is that when the delivery trucks come, or is that when your trailer drivers are?
Trailer drivers.
Drivers generally just leave the property. They would never be coming onto the property to make the delivery at that hour.
So they won't be filling the tanks at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning.
Absolutely.
Call from pharmacy.
If we, Joe, could you mute?
Yes, sorry.
That's okay.
So I didn't get the answer.
So tractor trailers that start between 3 and 4 are leaving the site. They would never be coming there to make a delivery at that hour. They're just leaving the property and going elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other comments from the public or planning board? Okay. Hearing none. Do we have to close the public hearing?
You know, I know that's been a matter of practice, but I don't see a need for it because this isn't a board with separate hearing and decision periods.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't see a need to do that.
Hello.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Linda. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I'm Linda Roderick at 414 Great Western Road, and I have a question in regards to the tankers leaving the property of, the location in question. And it's been in my recollection that it sometimes is like two or three trucks leaving anywhere between 2 to 4 a.m. in the morning. Is this going to be an added thing for the LP tanks, trailer tanks coming in?
No.
If so, how much do we need to anticipate for the noise factor?
No, there will be no additional trucks leaving at that hour.
But why should there be any trucks leaving in that hour between those? That's a lot of trucks. It wakes me up in the morning. Between the hours.
I'm sorry, Ms. Roderick, if I could just interject. So the question should be asked through the board, and the board should then direct that question if they want an answer to whoever is fit to ask it.
So the question to you, Mr. Tasha, regarding the hours, are there going to be additional trucks that are leaving in conjunction with the amount that are leaving now? I guess that's the question. Was that right? Okay.
No, there will be no additional trucks. It'll be the same amount of trucks. I'm not adding any trucks to this.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the public?
Just one more question from me in regards to the fire marshals, the state fire marshals acceptance or what, and any questions from them about what's going on here?
So as far as what's your question on that?
Has the state fire marshal signed off on this project?
I can answer that.
Okay. So the question is, has the state fire marshal signed off on that? Go ahead.
Nothing is submitted to the fire marshal's office until local approval is granted, and only if your local fire chief wishes for their review. And he has stated that he does want fire marshal to review the project, but they can't review the project until it's been approved at the local level.
Thank you. That answers my question.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Braz, go ahead.
Thank you. I guess one follow-up question, and to whoever it is applicable to, what are the town's ordinances in regards to operations of this type, in non-traditional business hours, for the trailer trucks to be leaving at, if the operators arrive at the property at 3 a.m, how does that fall into what ordinances are in place and for the property usage?
Okay. So John, you want to speak to that?
I'll do my best. There are no controls under the zoning bylaw about that particular issue. I have to admit, I don't know whether there are other chapters, bylaws in the Harwich Code that particularly address that. I know something like with a noise bylaw, specifically would exempt something like a use like this. And usually noise is geared more towards something like entertainment or some agricultural operations, not trucking per se. So as I'm familiar with, there aren't controls under zoning regulations for a use like this and deliveries. Usually it's handled by way of a board reviewing it and imposing, I guess, some reasonable conditions on a project if it sees fit to do so.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions from public or the board?
Yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Brown, go ahead.
I guess that would be my position then. I mean, if there could be conditions that are specifically placed through the approval to ensure that that the enterprise continues to operate or operates within a specific time parameter that's what would be considered something close to business hours, I guess.
Well, what was it stated before? 3 to 4 a.m. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what time the tractor trailers would be leaving. That's what time they've always have started at that project, and the small trucks start between 7 and 8 a.m.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, this is why I kind of laid the groundwork for site plan review where a special use permit is not required and it's permitted as a right. So the board, you also don't want conditions operating as a de facto denial where the use is allowed as a matter of right. So I think this is a fair discussion to have with Mr. Tasha, Mr. Driscoll. We should ensure that those conditions actually work with his business. And if you can come to some sort of reasonable middle ground on those, that's, I think, a condition that could be imposed. But I certainly wouldn't impose a condition without understanding his business and understanding whether that will work an effective denial of the site plan special permit where the use is allowed as of right.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Stoltz?
Yes, Mr. Stoltz, go ahead.
I believe they said that they were only going to have the tractor trailers leaving 3 or 4 times a week. Is that correct?
No, they would be bringing loads in 3 or 4 times to those separate tanks.
Oh, okay. How many days a week would the trailer trucks be leaving at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning?
Right now, it's 5 to 6. It always has been.
Okay. The board might think about stipulating a certain amount of days, if that's anybody's opinion.
Would that impede the business?
Yeah, it would seriously impede it because it's not just providing service for there, it's providing a lot of service elsewhere on the Cape.
Just one question. These tankers that leave...
Could you state your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Linda Roderick from 414 Great Western.
Okay, Linda, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. The tankers that leave from that location, are they just for Mr. Tasher, or are there other entities that leave out of there? Because I've heard them come out of there like 3 times a night, and I don't think they're all his. Do you have other entities that leave that location?
Nope, but there's other trucks that are parked on the other side of not on my property, that have nothing to do with me, that are parking at those other places on the other side of that fence.
Oh, okay. So they're all tankers, and what time are they leaving?
No, they're not tankers. There's dump trucks.
No, the ones I've heard are tankers.
What?
Great Western Road, we've got plenty of trucks going up and down. I'm just saying, I want to know, because sometimes I've heard them during the past winter at 2:30, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's like continuous. Like, I don't think they're all yours, but I don't know who's leaving, but it is a noise. It's a noise, incident for me.
If I could speak for Mr. Tasha, we can't speak to anyone else's trucks. We're concerned about, or we're talking about Mr. Tasha's trucks.
Oh, okay. Okay, but they're coming out of his property.
I understand that. Mr. Tasha, is any?
No, those are only my trucks that are leaving at 3, 4 o'clock with tankers. Anyone else in the neighborhood with trucks, I mean, I don't have control over who it is and what they're doing. I'm not really sure who else is leaving there, but those are just my trucks that leave that property.
Mr. Chair, if I could interject, I think the rub to me sounds like I've heard a lot about 3 or 4, and I even just heard it from Mr. Tasha. I don't know that it makes sense. If that's the business model and that's what's necessary, because it really is serving, Cape Cod, why would you want to potentially limit it? Does it really help to limit it? No delivery shall be between 3 or 4. I mean, it's still early. So it probably doesn't make sense in that case.
Right.
I don't know if you want to just ask Mr. Tasha, is there some time that he could work with he might just say no, because it seems to me to be an early morning business, and sometimes you're making emergency fills for people who rely on fuel to heat homes, et cetera, especially in the winter.
Yeah, Mr. Tasha, the town planner just said, like, is there wiggle room on the hours, or is that pretty much the business model?
This time of year, yes, but like in the winter time, it's like an energy thing. I'm supplying a lot of towns, and there's a lot of need for it. I mean, we try to be as respectful as we can, and I don't have guys just hanging out there. I mean, we get in the trucks and we just leave, and no engine brakes and stuff like that from my trucks.
Well, I mean, I think the way that the conditions and the fines are written, I'm comfortable with. And with the addition of the fence maintained on the northern property line that was recommended. So I would entertain a motion from any of the planning board.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Stoltz.
Okay, Mr. Stoltz.
The only condition I'd like to see put on all those conditions is that the fence be maintained at the property line. That is not on all the way through. That's the one thing I'd like to see.
The fence maintained on the northern property line? Was that the?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chairman Peterson, are you ready for a motion?
I believe so. Mr. Chadwick, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify what was just asked. So it sounded like you're saying, I think, Bill, that you want a condition that says the fence will be maintained at the northern property line. But going back to the previous discussion we had about the fence being actually on the Cape Cod Rail Trail, and we said we wanted to keep either it there, or if they replace it, with John's recommendation that the conditions say that some kind of buffer needs to be maintained there. And I don't know if that's the same thing you were saying, Bill, or not, but it sounded like you were saying rather than leave it where it is now, you wanted to have the fence moved to the property line like now as a condition for this approval. And I'm not sure that that's what we agreed to previously or discussed.
Right.
I'm sorry.
Right. Well, we could say that he would have to maintain the fence where it is, and when that can no longer be repaired, that it should be moved to the property line? For a new fence?
You could draft it in that way, but understand there's also the potential to acquire the sufficient property rights to maintain it where it is. So we throw, that in as well. You guys have to make the decision, but there's a bunch of different considerations.
Okay. So, John, do you think it should be just stated to move the fence to the property line and that it be maintained as long as that business is in working?
I think keeping the fence in its current location or moving it to the property line is performing the function that's called out under the zoning bylaw for screening. So I was, comfortable with what Mr. Chadwick raised, adding an additional condition that just said simply, because this decision will run with the property, that a fence shall be maintained on or along the northern property line. That is to say, if the fence fell down and they wanted to move it, well, yeah, I guess they could place it where it is, but they probably would move it towards closer to the property line anyway. But it gives them that option, and it also doesn't mean on day one that they have to go move it, because I think it's performing its function now.
I know. Okay. Okay. Any other comments? Mr. Harris, were you about to entertain a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. McFarland. Sorry.
Mr. Chairman, I just would like to point out, we can't issue any orders with respect to that fence. First of all, this petitioner doesn't own it, and it's not on his property. Now, if the board wants to make a finding or a condition of approval that he has to put a fence up on his property, that's altogether different. But I don't think we can do anything with regard to that fence that's on the other property. It's not part of this petition, and he doesn't own it. He can't touch that fence.
Well, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
Bill, again, I'd like to ask the question: does Cape Cod Oil own that fence? Did they put it up?
Good question, Bill.
Yeah, Harris, does that install or your dad installed?
It could have possibly been installed when we built that garage, but I honestly don't know.
Do you agree, Mr. Petitioner, that the fence is not on your property?
Yes.
As far as I'm concerned, if you were my client, you wouldn't touch that fence. All due respect.
This is John. So I think interestingly, if we go back to that condition though, I think that works out well. I mean, let's say this isn't Mr. Tosh's fence and it comes down. A condition would still require that there be a fence maintained on or along the northern property line. So we have to install it at that time. I agree. As much as I respect your legal prowess, Counselor, I've been through enough cases where ownership isn't necessarily, of personal property isn't necessarily dictated about whether it's located on one's real property.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the way, John, the way that it's written, it kind of, it goes with everything. So any possible condition that could happen, it's either way, the northern property line has to be maintained. Okay. So, Mr. Harris.
Take a motion to adopt the foregoing recommended findings and conditions and grant with conditions site plan special permit approval in case number PB 2020-28 MJG Enterprises Cape Cod Oil 6 Station Avenue subject to the following additional condition. The applicant shall maintain a fence along the northern property line.
Dave, would you want to say on? Did you say on or along?
I said along, I would have no objection to on the northern property line. I've tried to word it so they could, if they can maintain the existing fence, and if that is not possible, they need to provide a new fence.
Okay. Okay, so we have.
If the attorneys present feel that that's not adequate or careful enough wording, I'm certainly willing to entertain a modification.
I think you did an exemplary job, Mr. Harris.
There we go. So we do have a motion.
It wasn't good enough to get a second, though.
Bill Stokes, second.
Okay, so we have a motion from David Harris and Bill Stoltz in the second on there. So this is a vote on the adoption of the findings, the conditions, and site plan. Is that correct?
That's right.
All wrapped in one. And I'll do a roll call for this. Alan Peterson, aye. Duncan Berry not here. Sorry, Mr. John, can Arthur vote on this?
Arthur can vote on this because you're acting as a special permit granting authority. And
Okay.
the zoning act does allow, even with a planning board, an alternate to be named in a special permit granting authority. It doesn't allow that under the subdivision control law.
Okay, thank you. Craig Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland?
Joe McFarland, aye.
Mary Maslowski? Here. Bill Stoltz?
Bill Stokes, aye.
And Arthur Rouse?
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Okay. I believe that's it. Unanimous. I believe that's it, right? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And continuing with the advisory opinions, we have the Zoning Board of Appeals. They provided various Zoning Board of Appeals. Any comments on any of these? Look pretty.
I did review them, Mr. Chair. They seem to be, I'm still trying to find my way and determine kind of what the planning board wants, whether you want to make a substantive comment or you want to see whether there would be any planning board involvement. These are all things within the wheelhouse of the Zoning Board of Appeals. They're all residential special permits to extend or alter dimensional nonconformities. So I would suggest that we don't have any kind of unique or special comments, the zoning board.
Usually the only comment we have is Joe mentioning the campground, and that's pretty much it.
Those are the things I'm going to have to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, old business. Do we have any old business? I guess any old business at all? No? Briefings and reports by board members at all? No? I know that we had town meeting this past weekend. I was unable to be there, but I guess everything passed that was proposed, so it's good. And other than that, I think we're good.
This Dave Harris.
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
Just, if we haven't already, I'd certainly like to welcome John to his new position, and we all look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be in service to the town and look forward to working with all of you as well.
Yeah.
With that, I move adjournment.
And I'll second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second. I do have to do a roll call on this. Alan Peterson, aye. Craig Chadwick.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Joe McFarland.
Joe McFarland, aye.
Aaron Maslowski. No. Bill Stoltz.
Bill Stoltz, aye.
And Arthur Rouse.
Arthur Rouse, aye.
Yeah, John, great to have you aboard. Thank you again for going above and beyond with the packet for me. Between Little League and all that stuff, it was a juggle, so I appreciate it. But with that, meeting's adjourned. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Jim.
Thanks. Thank you. Yep.